Welcome to the Plant a Trillion Trees podcast. I'm Eva Monheim.
And I'm Hal Rosner. We are both certified arborists through the International Society of Arboriculture. The purpose of our podcast is to encourage tree planting and proper tree care for our urban forests, which include neighborhoods, parks, and other open spaces.
We will also cover a myriad of tree topics, including the important role trees play in relationship to the climate crisis. Thank you for joining us.
Verdant Earth Educators provides dynamic in-person training and online learning opportunities for environmental and horticultural businesses. Owned by ISA certified arborists and former university faculty, the Verdant Earth Educator team provides consultations on tree care and recommends climate-resilient opportunities for your valued green spaces. Verdant Earth Educators is all about seeding knowledge for success. Find Verdant Earth Educators at verdanteartheducators.com.
Monheim Microphones designs and handcrafts top-tier studio microphones and preamps right here in the United States in Hollywood, California. Their incredible line of innovative microphones and designs are used around the world by everyone from podcasters to top-charting record producers and singers. Monheim Microphones' unparalleled excellence. MonheimMicrophones.com. This podcast is being recorded on May 17th, 2024. Erica Kratofil is co-executive director for The Giving Grove, where she helps lead a national network of urban community orchard and food forest programs. As a social worker, Erica is passionate about community vitality and the many ways that urban orchards benefit people and the planet. Erica is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and has a master's in social work and nonprofit management from Washington University in St. Louis. She has worked previously in education, food security initiatives, and community-based housing programs. She also served as a social work field instructor for the University of Kansas and the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Welcome to the Plant a Trillion Trees podcast, Erica. We're delighted that you could be with us today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So, Erica, if we were to ask you how you found your way to Giving Grove through social work or horticulture, how did all that happen? And where did you go to school? And where did you grow up? And all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I do not have a formal background in horticulture or urban ag, but I've learned quite a lot since I joined the Giving Grove team. I grew up in Kansas City and grew up spending summers at my grandparents' house in the mountains of North Carolina. And I loved exploring the woods behind their house and always found so much joy and peace in spending time in nature. So that's something that's always been an interest of mine. My undergraduate degree is from the University of Notre Dame, and I studied journalism there. I spent the summers in college doing Metro News reporting internships at some cities, first in Kansas City and then in Boston. And during those experiences, I really learned a lot about the challenges that our urban areas face and the injustices that many communities experience in urban areas. And that got me really interested in social work. I met some amazing social workers on different stories that I was covering and was really moved by the impact that they were having in their communities. So after graduation, I spent a summer with the AmeriCorps Vista program as a volunteer. I worked in St. Louis in a program that served people who are unhoused and people who live in subsidized housing. And again, I was really touched by the work that the social workers were doing, the advocacy that they were doing, and the way that they were a voice for those communities. So I decided to stay in St. Louis and get a master's degree in social work at Washington University. And while I was there, I had the chance to be part of a program for women interested in nonprofit leadership. So I had some additional mentoring and training in nonprofit administration. I eventually made my way back to Kansas City, my hometown, and worked in a few different social service agencies, but always with a focus on serving communities that have experienced injustice or inequities. And I was working in an organization that provided food security programs when I first learned about the Giving Grove. So there was a board member for our organization who knew the founders of Giving Grove, and he was really excited about what they were doing and kept talking to me about it and encouraging me to meet them. And I put him off for a while. I said, I'm doing some really meaningful work right now, and I'm really engaged in it. But as I continued to hear more about it from him over the years, I became more and more interested. So had a coffee meeting with the founders. And after just a few meetings, found myself joining their team to work on the national expansion of Giving Grove. So if I'm being really honest, I would say the gardener or the food grower in our household is my husband. He gets all the credit for all of the garden beds that we have at our house. But I love the way the Giving Grove brought together so many things I care about. So the food access, food security piece, but also the community building that we see around orchards, the way that caring for these shared spaces helps people get to know one another, and all of the mental health benefits that come from working in the orchards or spending time in the orchards, and all of the ongoing education that happens. So many opportunities for lifelong learning for people of all ages. And that's what really excited me about the Giving Grove. And that's how I became part of the team.
That's really a wonderful story. And I have to say that I think social workers are a very special people because they see things that a lot of other people don't, not only on the ground, as you're saying, the need, but they see a larger need within the environment when they are working with people. And we had Mindy Maslin here, who was a social worker who started the Tree Tenders program. And to me, that was just so intuitive for her to see that there was a need for shade for people who were in areas where they didn't have proper shade in their communities. So kind of transition in thinking about that. I know your organization's a national organization. What is your bigger picture from one city to the larger United States? How do you see your organization carrying that mission through to each and every state in the nation?
I think it's important to say that our program started as a local program. Mm-hmm. So the founders initially were trying to address some issues of food access for urban neighborhoods in Kansas City, where they were from. But they learned really quickly that the community embraced it and that it had so many important impacts that they wanted to have the opportunity to share that with other cities. And they got some really great advice early on to do that by partnering with existing nonprofits. So in every city where we have a program, that program is done in partnership with an organization that's already existing, already well established in the community. And that is a huge part of why we've been able to do what we do, because we have these really important partnerships in our affiliate network. And there are some core tenets that remain the same across every city. So one of those is that we always seek to be invited into a neighborhood. We would never want to push an orchard or a food forest on a neighborhood. We want this to be community-led and community-driven. So for each site, there are a minimum of 2 local volunteers who are trained to be the orchard stewards. They're the ones who go through the workshops and are taking the lead on caring for those sites week in and week out, making sure that the neighborhood's engaged and the food is distributed. And then also a focus on serving neighborhoods that have faced some kind of injustice. So environmental injustice, economic, social injustice, because we believe that the trees can have really powerful impact in those communities. So we're looking at things like tree equity score, we're looking at tree canopy, we're looking at other factors that indicate health equity or ways that these trees can do so many things. They provide the food, but they also can lower urban air temperatures during the summer. They can refresh the soil, stabilize the soil. They can provide green space where people can have some really important mental health benefits from spending time sitting among the trees. And so our focus is making sure that these trees get to the communities that can really benefit the most from those different pieces.
Let's just jump into a little bit of horticulture because you're doing such a great job laying out the nuts and bolts of Giving Grove. Tell us about some of the trees that you use and what's working well and what's not.
Yeah, so we have a portfolio of about 70 different cultivars that represent more than 20 species of fruits, berries, and nuts. We certainly do a lot of things that might come to your listeners' minds immediately, like pears, apples. Everyone loves peaches. We also have many programs that are focusing on native varieties. So where I am here in the Midwest, we're talking about things like pawpaw, persimmon, aronia berry. And then since we're in so many different climates, our programs go nationwide, coast to coast, Atlanta to Seattle, Dallas to New England. We have different varieties that work in different parts of the country. So our program in Dallas is experimenting with some citrus fruits. We try very hard to offer a variety so that the neighborhoods can choose things that are culturally relevant to them. And we also encourage and talk a lot about the importance of biodiversity. So we would never want a neighborhood to have just an orchard of peach trees, for example. We would want to make sure that they have the biodiversity for several reasons. You have a longer harvest season if you have food that's ripening at different times. But also if there's a pest or disease pressure that's impacting one variety in a year, you may still be able to have a harvest from something else. And so we talk a lot about the importance of that as well.
I think that's really very thoughtfully laid out program. And thinking back to when I was a child and going to the different orchards as a kid, that whole activity of orchard is very communal. It's a group of people who are picking and a group of people who may be canning and a group of people who may be drying and all those different processes. It's just not one person. It's a lot of people and everybody benefiting from that. I know where my son-in-law lives right now, and he actually is from Tunisia, and that's what they do. It's very communal when they're picking the olives and when they're pressing the olive oil and other products too, like dates and figs and things like that. And I think that what you're doing is bringing back community to the community that kind of has fallen apart. And you're bringing a higher level of thought and activity to the people who might not have that connection. Do you also see yourself bringing food to those places that are food impoverished, where the markets are not available, where people are not setting up little markets for people who are in poor neighborhoods? Is that something that you're also thinking about?
We are. We look at a lot of data for all of our sites. We look at census data that talks to us about the demographics of the community, including income and race and ethnicity, the tree equity scores for neighborhoods. We look at USDA data on where there's limited food access, and all of those things go into thinking about where we want to make sure this program is available. And so we have really designed it to be such that these orchards can be within walking distance of people that have the least access to fresh food. So there is no barrier. There's no transportation barrier. There's no cost barrier. The food's available for free. And I think it's really important, again, to talk about our stewards because they're the ones who are making this happen. They're people from the community, care deeply about their neighbors, and want to help by making this source available. And they engage the community. They do things like harvest parties to get people out among the trees. When there's a tree or a group of trees ready to harvest, they'll put up a sign, maybe tie a ribbon around the tree to let people know. And they're really the ones who make these programs possible. We have some resources we bring also. We have tree tags that are bilingual, English and Spanish. They have photos of the fruit when it's ripe, so people know what it should look like. Has a little bit of information about the variety and when they should expect to be able to harvest. It has a QR code that can take them to the program landing page for more information. And it also says one of my favorite things, which is please take some and please leave some for your neighbor. And so we're really trying to encourage folks to think of these as communal assets and communal resources that everyone should be able to benefit from and enjoy.
I noticed, I think in the Vimeo mini doc that you have on your website, some data in terms of amount of food produced. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, as you collect that, and I love that phrase, we're growing healthy calories. Is there any way that data is ultimately going to find its way to USDA in terms of mapping?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And we have funding from the USDA. They've been a really great partner for us. So we have deep appreciation for the USDA and their work. And so we do share that data with them as a grantee. And we've had some conversations with their researchers about how they're looking at food access and sharing information about our orchard locations and talking to them about additional data that would be available or would be beneficial to us if it were available. And so I know that they're working on some new data points as well. But it's really exciting to have these trees and these perennial crops because they can do so much production. And we work really carefully to make sure that we're selecting cultivars that can do really well in the urban environment and looking at rootstock and at what they produce, making it pest and disease resistant to the extent that we can. We use all holistic biological approaches in our orchards, so we're avoiding a lot of the heavy pesticide chemical use that you might see in commercial orcharding and teaching people about beneficial plants and insects. Some really basic things like planting chives around the base of your peach trees to discourage the peach tree borer, using pollinator plants in the orchard, using understory plants that benefit the whole ecosystem there. And hopefully those are things that the volunteers are learning and are able to appreciate in other settings too.
Has there been a fruit that you found to be like a surprise for your orchards? Like you never thought you were going to be planting those?
Yeah. I think one is the citrus fruit that our Dallas orchards are experimenting with. I didn't think that would be in the range of our cities, but we'll see how it does. So last season was the first season. For me personally, the jujube was a big surprise. I'd never heard of a jujube before I came to the Giving Grove. People know it as an Asian date. And it's something that's very productive. There are jujube trees that have been producing fruit for hundreds of years. And it's something that our communities that have a large number of Asian residents really embrace and like to have. It's really fun for kids at school orchards because they can shake the tree to harvest the fruit. So the ripe fruit falls when they shake the tree. So that's really fun for them. And it can be used in a lot of different ways. It can be dried, it can be in a trail mix, it can be in bread. So personally, that's one that's been a surprise to me. And I've enjoyed seeing how it's used in the community.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of those coming down the pike. There's a lot of experimentation on fruits right now, which is really nice. I know some of the big breeders are looking at that. What's going to be a better fruit for excitement? It's a little bit different, like the plum quats, and they're really good. I mean, you taste that and you're like, wow, how come we didn't have these earlier?
Yeah. Yeah, I think another one like that is a native variety in our part of the country, in the pawpaw. You never see those in grocery stores because they don't have a long shelf life and they bruise easily and they're hard to transport. But if you're out foraging and you find one, it's really exciting. And some of our orchards are having some success with the pawpaw too.
Yeah, they make great bread because we used to do that at the university.
Pawpaw bread, Eva?
Pawpaw bread.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
I just use it like banana bread, only I substitute pawpaw for the bananas. And it usually has sour cream and sugar and eggs and vanilla.
Okay.
And it makes a really very moist bread. It's really good. And the students would try different recipes at school. I say, okay, we're going to try pawpaw, see what you think. You like them? What kind of recipes can we make from them? So that's what we would do.
Yeah, I think if AI was to do a scan of all our podcasts, Pawpaw is probably in the top 3 in terms of coming up for a discussion. And then we sent Pawpaw seeds to the West Coast.
David Tuschler, yeah.
David Tuschler. Devil Mountain.
Devil Mountain.
Yeah, I think he's a master propagator, and he sent a great photo. They're easy to propagate and grow.
Yeah.
Eva coached me through my first round, and then very quickly you have more than you need. And a friend of mine stopped by this morning to get one. So, okay, so we're off the track with Pawpaw. I wanted to ask, Erica, do you partner strategically with any nurseries? Are they supporting you? Do they custom grow for you? Are you getting bare roots or are you mostly potted? How's that working out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a dozen or more nurseries that we work with across the country to get all the different varieties and to try to get them as local as we can to the program or the city where they're going to be planted. And we have a tremendous network of nurseries and orchard suppliers who help support our network. Because we have 15 programs across the U.S. now, we're able to leverage that to get some bulk pricing for each of our sites. There are a number of vendors who donate things like liquid fish to be used as fertilizer in the orchards. Also probiotics. We use a lot of probiotics at our plantings. And there are some very generous companies out there that support us by donating those products to our whole network. We've been very fortunate to have those relationships. Generally speaking, we're receiving bare-rooted trees once a year, and those that will be planted in the very near future are planted bare root, and then those that will be planted later in the year are potted up and kept at a nursery at our local affiliate's site for the summer, usually, and then planted in the fall. So we are teaching volunteers how to plant both bare root and potted trees. We have a number of affiliate partners, program managers who are becoming really knowledgeable about grafting. There are some varieties that are getting harder and harder to find. There are a lot of really exciting things that are happening right now in urban forestry. There's been, as you know, I'm sure, a tremendous amount of support for urban forestry programs. So there's a lot of demand on tree nurseries right now. And so we're looking at ways to support our affiliates in doing more of their own grafting and propagating so that they're not as affected by some of these supply chain pressures we're beginning to see. I know that our program in Atlanta last year had demand for varieties that they couldn't find. And we want to make sure that we're getting out in front of that and being able to propagate some of our own so that we have our own supplies available. We have a partnership with Michigan State University and work with their extension agency that's in Detroit. And they're doing a lot of work in that space right now as well. So we're excited to see what comes out of some of those efforts they are doing.
I wanted to ask, do you work with any elementary schools? Because I could see little kids just wanting to do this and watch the plants grow and, wait to put them out there to plant and then go harvest them later on when they're older, when they're in high school, they'll be harvesting their fruit. Is that something that you think about?
We do. So more than a quarter of our orchards nationwide are at schools. And we have resources that our affiliates have developed for teachers to use the orchard as an outdoor classroom. So
Great.
lessons on soil biology, lessons on pruning, lessons on tree career paths. And the children help care for the fruit and then can take it home to share with their families. The first Giving Grove orchard ever planted was at an elementary school in Kansas City. It's Hale Cook Elementary. And one of my colleagues, our communications staff member, is the steward for that orchard because her kids go to school there. And every year they have a birthday party for the trees. So the kindergartners come out and decorate the trees and sing happy birthday to them. So it's really fun to have these sites at schools. And our partners in New England, Retreat Us, have developed a lot of resources for having orchards at schools, and they share those across our whole network. So our entire network's able to benefit from everything that they've done with their school partners.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. Do you know about our Philadelphia organization called Philly Orchard Project?
We do. We love Philly Orchard Project. They've been a very good friend to us. My co-director, Ashley Williamson, was able to spend some time out there with them last summer and learned a lot from them. We really have great respect for what they're doing and for all of the educational materials they put out. They have some really great resources, and we think very highly of them.
That's nice that you're able to connect.
It seems like it must be a lot of fun if all you fruit grower people get together. Is that ever an opportunity to gather under one orchard in some city and share your information?
There is. We do that every summer. We lovingly refer to it as Camp Giving Grove. And so we rotate to different cities that are in our network. This summer we'll be in Denver with our partner, Denver Urban Gardens. And Denver Urban Gardens has developed a lot of expertise with permaculture and food forest approaches. So we're really excited to bring everyone out to see some of their sites and what they're doing in that space. So we have an opportunity to see how these orchards work in different cities, to meet stewards from the local neighborhoods and learn about their experiences and the benefits that they're seeing and the support that they need. And to do sharing, a lot of sharing, collaboration on best practices, lessons learned, program planning for the next year. We have quarterly calls with our program managers that we do virtually to share best practices and to address topics that are coming up or resources that they need. And we do that at every level of our partner organizations. So we also have regular calls with the executive directors and regular calls with the fundraising and marketing staff. And these calls are really fun and they're really collaborative. I've been in nonprofits my whole life, and I have never been part of a network that's as transparent as this one is. I lead the calls with the fundraising staff, and someone will say, we're interested in talking to this funder. And someone else will say, I know them. I'll make an introduction. I can share the proposal that we put together. I mean, it's really amazing to see how a group of people who are so passionate about serving their communities can come together and share these resources and make everyone stronger for it. It's really fun.
That's wonderful. You don't hear that a lot.
You don't. And so I feel very lucky to be part of this amazing network. I mean, our affiliate partners are incredible, and the stewards on the ground delivering the services are incredible.
Yeah, and you're being so essentially involved in creating fruit, both metaphorically and in the real world. So that is really lovely. One technical question I have to ask is there ever a concern, since I'm assuming some of the sites might have had a previous life as a, industrial or whatever, does soil testing factor in? Is there ever a concern in terms of heavy metals and stuff like that?
Absolutely. We are doing soil testing and discovering what's there and what needs to be done. There's been some research that indicates that some of those things may be taken up into the trees, but they don't make it to the fruit. When we're talking about trees, it's a different story for berries. And so we do a lot of berries in all of our orchards because they can produce a harvest so quickly. You can have a harvest in that first year.
Right.
And that gives the community something to start with while we're waiting for the trees to mature. But we always are recommending that those berries be planted in raised beds with soil and compost brought in. And so that addresses that issue for the berries. And then for the trees, we are also looking at how we can add compost, mycorrhizal fungi, probiotics to support good soil health. So the soil testing is a part of that. And then teaching the volunteers how to use those soil amendments to address whatever the needs are for that site. Our horticulturalist refers to it as urbanite when we're out doing these plantings. And we find all kinds of things when we're digging. But it's incredible to see. If you give the trees a little support with the compost, the mycorrhizal fungi, the probiotics, they can thrive in these urban environments and provide some really amazing benefits for the community.
Yeah, I'm sure people like Paul Stamets would really endorse the idea of the heavy inoculation with the mycorrhizals and to knock back whatever bad stuff is in the soil.
Yeah.
And then I'm jumping around a little bit, Erica, but I'm sure there's students or people that are listening to this podcast that would love to work for Giving Grove, maybe in a new city. How would they approach Giving Grove and say, hey, I'm out here in Youngstown, Ohio. I want to do it,
We get those inquiries all the time, and we love to have those conversations. So our website is givinggrove.org, and there's a form on there where you can contact us. And we would be happy to start that conversation. And whether you are interested in learning about job opportunities within our network or interested in bringing the program to your city, we'd love to chat. Generally speaking, we are working in cities that are in the growing zones 4B through 8. So we know that's where our trees can be successful. We're looking to have programs in cities that have at least 75,000 residents who face food insecurity, because we believe we can have a big impact in those areas. And we're looking for cities that have an existing organization that's a nonprofit tree canopy organization or a community gardening organization that has the capacity and interest in being the local hub. And that's how we get these partnerships started. And we provide some seed funding to launch the program. We ask our partner to match that funding locally, and then we bring in all of the resources of our national network to help them get started and sustain it. We really want these to be long-term programs that continue to serve their communities for generations.
Do you also get restaurants involved in your work?
Yeah, one of the really neat things about this network is that it works a little bit differently in each city, but we've definitely seen examples of that happening. And we've also seen orchard sites that are growing food that's used in value-added products. So, for example, here in Kansas City, there's an organization called Boys Grow, and they have an orchard, and they have other crops growing on their land in addition to their orchard, and they make things like sauces and salsas. And so their young men who are in that program are learning how to grow and care for the plants and then make these products. We've also had the opportunity to partner with some organizations to make ciders when there's been some excess fruit, including some hard ciders that have benefited the program. And we have some other orchards that have event venues affiliated with them. And so the orchards are benefiting the neighborhood, and they're also providing a really nice setting for an event venue.
That's wonderful. There's nothing better than that. And it brings the community together and makes people talk.
Yes, for sure. I think that's one of my favorite things, is just getting to hear the stories from the stewards about their neighborhood, about their motivation for addressing the food security or the lack of green space or the lack of tree canopy. And just hearing their stories and how they bring their neighbors together in these sites is really inspirational.
It's wonderful.
I think you might have touched on this, but does Giving Grove have a preferred season for planting with the bare roots? Do you prefer fall or spring?
So it varies by each of our cities. In many of our Midwest cities, the bare roots are going in the spring. So we may be talking about something like March to late April. And then the potted trees are going in the fall. So we're talking October, November, maybe early December. Our more southern cities, Atlanta and Dallas, are actually planting over the winter. So sort of November, December, January, February timeline. So we're finding that the season definitely varies based on location and what's appropriate for their climate.
I'm assuming you probably have a pretty high success rate with the transplanting.
We do. And again, that goes back to credit to our horticulturalist and all the work that he's done to find the best rootstock and the trees that are going to be disease resistant and pest resistant. But we recently worked with an arborist to do a big study on those locations and determine that success rate. And we're finding it's around 90%, a survival rate of around 90% for our trees. And that credit, of course, also goes to the stewards. So they are in the orchard every week, year round, scouting for pest and disease pressures, watering during the heat of the growing season, pruning regularly, maintaining the mulch and the compost. And they deserve a lot of credit for that success rate.
And is it your horticulturist that turned the organization on to grafting? That's pretty impressive.
Yes, and then also some of our program managers. So in Cincinnati, our affiliate partner there is called the Common Orchard Project, and they're part of Green Umbrella. And the program manager there, Chris Smith, saw this need and really took about to learn as much as he could about it. And he's now sharing that knowledge with the rest of our network.
Eva, do you have a comment on grafting? You're our propagation person.
Yeah, grafting can have many, many benefits, especially when you have a disease-resistant rootstock that can help the scion wood once it's put into the root graft. The other thing, too, is that you can have the same kind of rootstock clear across the board for a lot of different scion wood. You might have 10 different scion wood, but then have the same root stock, which makes it much easier when you're buying plant material that you can buy one type of plant that has the root stock that you're looking for, and then putting the scion on that. Again, it's like roses, and I know roses really well because on the West Coast, it's one type of rootstock. On the East Coast, it's a different one, but it's the same rootstock, and all the different roses are grafted onto that if, it's a hybrid tea or something like that. But yeah, rootstocks are really important. And especially if you're in an urban environment where you might need to have a tougher rootstock for the type of soil that you have. That would be one thing I would think of right off the top of my head. But yeah, I think it's a really wonderful way to keep the different types of scion wood alive, if you will.
Right.
And of course, there's that group of hunters that are always looking for more apple stock.
Heritage.
Yeah, the heritage scion. And I think that can actually perpetuate a lot of new plant material. I mean, it was available years ago, but reintroducing it into the marketplace. And I was going to ask you something about that. My question is, are you guys on the lookout for something that might be like a blip in your orchards that might be a new variation on the species that you're working with that may be the Giving Grove plant?
Pecan.
Yeah, the Giving Grove pecan, right?
Yes.
Or the walnut.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because one of our founders is really interested in that. And he's retired from our board, but he has connected us with some researchers who are working on some new varieties. And we've had some conversations. And yeah, it's not impossible that there could someday be a Giving Grove pecan, Giving Grove walnut. That could be really fun, but no announcements pending, that's for sure.
I've been to Proven Winners does a lot with small fruit. So that's a really great organization. And also Bailey's Nursery does fruit too. So they're both big operators. But sometimes you just come across an oddball that you're least expecting. And, you never know when it's going to happen.
Right.
Make a better apple pie.
The next Honey Crisp.
Yes.
So after all this discussion, what is your favorite tree?
I have to say it's the pecan tree, and it's because of the longevity that those trees have. They can go for hundreds of years, and they really make me think about the tenets of our organization. And there's a quote I always think about with those kinds of trees, and it's that the goal in life is to plant a tree under whose shade you do not expect to sit. And I think that really sums up our program because that's what we're all about. We're all about bringing people together to create a community asset that will serve the community for generations. And so it's a great way to think about what we're doing with this network and what we envision it to be.
That's wonderful. And it kind of harkens back to the chestnut. Before the chestnut went away. I mean, it's here, but it's not. That was something that everyone did. Whoever you were in the United States, everybody was involved in chestnut picking. Mm-hmm. Everybody had their chestnut baskets. Everybody knew exactly when to go in their area, and they would go chestnut picking. And that is very communal, and that brings people together. Where'd you go this time to get your chestnuts? I can just imagine, a whole group of people just carrying their baskets and walking into the woods and chit-chatting and talking about their lives. And that's the way I kind of envision it for your organization, where people are coming together and collecting that fruit, those plums, those peaches, those amelanchier, those, service berries, all those things at different times of the year and making it a really wonderful community.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And it's so fun to be in the orchards during the harvest season because invariably you'll see someone who's brought someone new and they're showing them like, this is how you know the fruit is ripe and this is how you pick it. And the moment of tasting a fruit right off the tree for the first time is amazing because it's so much juicier and more flavorful than you can imagine if you've never done that before. And it's so fun to see that. And I really enjoy having that opportunity.
Yeah, and just think of all the plastic that's not getting used in the packaging. I mean,
right.
The guilt that washes over me when I have to get grocery store fruit in their big, heavy plastic containers and stuff.
Absolutely.
One quick pecan story is, so on our honeymoon, Central Texas bought, I don't know if it was like a 15-pound sack of pecans, but, we were in pecan country. I don't know if it was a variety, but they sold them as paper thins. And by the end of the drive through Texas, I was able to master holding two in my hand and just deftly crack them against each other and have the whole nut. How's that?
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The shells were paper thin. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's a great skill.
So thank you for indulging me. It's a story that had to be shared.
Taking you back a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
We have pecan trees up here. We used to have one at the university where I worked. It was just a row on both sides of an old driveway, an old farm driveway, walnuts on one side and pecans on the other. And the reason why they would plant them that way was because they could bring the wagon up the driveway and fill it with all the heavy fruit. And then at the top of the driveway was where they would store the nuts underground. And I just always think that that's the coolest thing, thinking about the historical significance of nuts in our country and how important and a role they played in nourishment, because they could last all the way through till springtime. The month of April classified as the death month. That was usually when your stores were empty. So if you could have an extra bumper crop of nuts that would take you through until May, then you would survive. And I always think that that's really something to think about, and how much we don't appreciate what we do have. And I think that the Giving Grove is something to appreciate, knowing what you're doing and what you're doing for communities. It's really wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you for being on our podcast.
Yeah, Erica, this has been great. I think our listeners learned a lot. I know I did. And I wish Giving Grove continued success. I hope we bump into each other at some fruity conference. Now that came out wrong.
And hopefully you'll be in every city.
Yes, absolutely. And if you are in a city with the Giving Grove ever, let us know. We'd be happy to connect you to some local sites.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Erica. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Planet Trillion Trees podcast is edited by Andromedan Recordings in Hollywood, California.